whether and how Eric Hanse's half full glass can be filled. And I propose to do that, but I want, while being positive and constructive, also to be sober, be very sober. And I'm reminded of Stalin's great phrase at the end of collectivization. He said, "We're dizzy with success." I think we have to be careful that we aren't dizzy with success, that we be honest about what we have not done and what we have yet to do. And that's what I want to focus on. Now, why the caution? Because the great progress that has been achieved across Central Asia and the region as a whole is heavily driven, heavily dependent upon gas, oil, uranium resources. And I suggest that you recalculate the income figures by deleting those resources and look at the modern new enterprises that are being created and look at the degree of progress that they have brought about. Certainly, it is still impressive, but we have to realize a lot more needs to be done. Now, the question I would raise right at the beginning: has the progress been delayed by civilizational or cultural factors? Is there something about this region that has caused it to be advance less quickly in a lot of other areas than one might hope? Well, I don't think that's the case. And let me just remind the non-Central Asians in the room that it was, after all, people from this region who measured the Earth more accurately than anyone else 600 years before Copernicus, who created the field of medicine from Europe all the way to India, who invented the concept of specific gravity, without which you wouldn't have modern technology, founded the field of algebra, hypothesized the existence of both North and South America as inhabited continents 1,000 years ago. And one of them gave his name to the concept of algorithm. That's a Central Asian, Al-Khwarizmi. Now, so I don't think, there's not some deficit in the intellectual genealogy here. That isn't the problem. It's something else. Now, let me turn to that golden age for a minute, because we totally misconceive what was about. We constantly refer to the Silk Road as if you had a bunch of little people with camels in Central Asia who were running silk from China or somewhere to Europe or somewhere. That's not what happened. First of all, it wasn't, the silk mostly came from Central Asia, manufactured in Central Asia. They weren't stupid. They saw the Chinese silk, they figured out how to do it. We have mulberry trees too. They made as good silk and saved 1,000 miles of transport. So the Central Asians were manufacturers of silk. They were huge manufacturers of cotton. It was an enormous industry here, and of cotton fiber and of printed cotton fiber. We forget all this, but we think that they were just a bunch of camel drivers. No, and much more important, they built the hotels. It wasn't built by some Swiss company. They built the hotel, the caravanserai. They were all locally built. This is very important. And who made the loans that made that industry possible? The Central Asians dominated the finance field. They were making the loans. They were also providing the insurance. Are you going to allow thousands of pounds of valuable product to go marching across the desert with no insurance? No. Central Asians created an insurance industry that worked. Now, It wasn't just logistics that they were concerned with. Yes, they were, but much more. They were manufacturing, as I mentioned, the fabric, silk and cotton. But what about iron? You all know the concept of Damascus steel. That came from actually what is now the border of Afghanistan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan. Damascus steel is in fact Central Asian steel, which was, if you will, stolen by the manufacturers in Damascus, and they were able to make it faster and cheaper there. But my point is the level of technology and manufacturing was high. And I think we have to note that this happened because of a collaboration of cultures within Central Asia. There's all this talk, which I find disappointing and unproductive, about the Turkic ethnicity or the Persianate ethnicity. No, in this golden age, it was exactly the collaboration between the Turkic people, who originally were mainly in the countryside, and the urban Persianate people. They each totally depended upon the other. Neither could have, there wouldn't have been a nomadic civilization in Kazakhstan had there not been cities to which they could bring their products. There are a lot of nomadic products, and sell them. And similarly, the urban people couldn't have existed had they not had Turkic folks in the countryside providing insurance. So my point is, they collaborated. They knew how to collaborate. Now, what's going on today? There's collaboration at the presidential level. We all hear about the meetings, all publicized, when the presidents get together. That's very good. And they've talked about many subjects: technology, water, energy, and so forth. But the problem is there's very little follow-up. There's talk, if you will, blah, 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 but not follow-up. There's not structured follow-up. And there's a reason for that. There are many reasons for it. I don't think it's cultural. I think there are other factors. But what I want to stress, and this is hugely important, and we keep sweeping this under the carpet. Oh, don't worry about it. We can do without it. There is no structured, organized, effective regional organization. Now, if you take nothing else from this presentation of mine, keep in mind, you are sitting in the only serious world region without its own institutional structures. Everyone has them. I don't mean ASEAN was mentioned. By the way, 6 years ago, we took a big delegation of young businessmen and women from across Central Asia to Singapore for a week, and we met the entire high command of ASEAN, and every one of the participants sent back a report to their government that this is something worth studying. No response anywhere. But my point is, this puts your region behind the 8 ball. Compared with South America, you have Mercosur. It's complicated and not all that successful, but it's there. You have of course the Caribbean nations. The little islands in the Caribbean have an organization, very effective. The South Pacific Islands, I'm not talking about the big organizations, these exist. The Nordic Council, they're all over the world except here. Now, what's going on? No one calculates the cost of this absence. The non-existence of a regional structure comes at a price. What is that price? Well, think of yourself as a foreign investor. You can come to Kazakhstan, you have a market of 20 million, you can go to, but add 40 from Uzbekistan. You have 60, and you can keep adding. And if you want, as I would eventually, to add Afghanistan, you're way over hundreds of millions. But that doesn't happen because it's not yet realistic to make take such an approach. Now, why does this not happen? Why do you not have people investing on a region-wide basis? Let's be very sober about this. Very simply, slow borders. People know that borders are slow. You can look, the international logistics guys, you can go on their website, they'll tell you how many minutes it takes to get across each border on the planet. And if you make that calculation, if Central Asia is low on the list, you lose. That's reality. You also have absence of a region-wide business visa. Why would someone want to do business in Central Asia as such if he has to get 5 different visas? There's no, and then suppose you put yourself in the position of a tourist. We heard eloquent talk about tourism yesterday. Good luck. You know, is there a region-wide tourist visa? No. Now, I understand there are complications for each of these. There are reasons, and I'm not minimizing that. But these are Rubik's cubes that have solutions. Now, beyond that, there's the whole field of tariffs, of standards, of laws, of regulations, and so on, which is an impediment now to region-wide trade and investment. Now, the further problem is that except for the voices of the presidents, and all presidents in the region from time to time make public statements that get into the press, and should, because they're often very important. However, this is striking failure of educated men and women across Central Asia to address the world public. They have full access to international publications, newspapers, television, etc. Very few avail themselves of it. Is this some Soviet pachmiel that only the president talks abroad? I don't know the cause of it, but it's a fact. And because you have no voices abroad, that impedes your development. You have 5 voices abroad to the extent that you have any, not a single voice. Now, what is the effect of this situation? And this is very important. It invites everyone, not just good guys and bad guys, everyone abroad to play one of you off against the others. Divide and conquer, a concept coined by Julius Caesar when he was fighting in the Gallic Wars. He said it works, and it does work. And you are victims of divide and conquer because of your absence of coordination and cooperation. Now, why has this not happened? There are some good reasons and some not good reasons, and some of the good reasons are not known. Let me focus on these. First of all, we all, especially Americans, should recognize this multi-vectored approach that it was everyone practiced it after the collapse of the USSR. President Nazarbayev made it into almost a doctrine, which your current president of Kazakhstan wrote a book about. And that he added then the way to do it is balance Russia with China, and then an addendum, you balance both of them with the West, with the United States. But this is an old practice. The United States did this. It balanced England, this was the Russia of the day, it balanced England with France, and then it balanced both of them briefly tried to with Russia. So, okay, you have this policy. It's going forward. But here's, that is not the only factor. I want to stress that the Central Asians, it's not because they're incapable of coordinating and cooperating with each other. They're good at it, but but they've tried. And in the 1990s, and this is the heart of what I have to say today, there was an institution called the Central Asia Union or the Central Asia Economic Union. It had very active participation from Kazakhstan particularly, and it was so successful. It covered economics, it covered law, it covered even military matters. I remember, as I've mentioned to a couple of you yesterday, I remember seeing Uzbek soldiers in uniform on the streets of Bishkek during the Central Asia Economic Union. I asked them, what on the world are you doing here? And they said, oh, Central Asia Economic Union, as if it was obvious, but it wasn't obvious. But this was all going on. This was so successful. This was so successful, this Central Asia Economic Union. I've heard several Central Asians in the last day say it was somehow it failed. It didn't fail. It was destroyed because of its success. Vladimir Putin asked if he could be an observer, and they had no grounds for saying no. The Central Asians, you know, neither the Chinese nor the Europeans nor the Americans were going to say, don't do it. They said, it's your decision. So that he becomes an observer. 2 years later, he says, well, we'd like Russia to be a member. Again, same response, silence. Central Asians had no way of resisting. They remember and become a member. And then 2 years after that, Volodya Putin again says, well, okay, now we're going to close down the Central Asia Union and we're going to create the Eurasian Economic Union. And then he created, also on top of that, the Common Security Treaty Organization. This obliterated Central Asia. This was an institutional destruction, planned campaign that succeeded. And it succeeded so well that they even suppressed news of the existence of this entity. Look, try to find it on Wikipedia. Those who destroyed it also got it out of the news. So this is obviously, people who are aware of this are very cautious today. I'm suggesting that time for that caution may be passing. Events in Ukraine are dramatically changing the situation. It's not an overstatement to say that no matter what happens in the war in Ukraine, Russia loses. And it'll probably be a generation or more before it restabilizes in any serious way. So where does this leave us? I think that, yes, it's nice that we have confidence building measures. It's nice that Kazakhstan took the lead in creating, coordinating on a global level, religious groups, and then the financial center in Astana. Wonderful initiative, bravo. On the other hand, it's global. There has never been there anything that says we are Central Asian. That would be very welcome. That means you end up today with a two-tiered Central Asia. This is not good. You have the relatively rich and prospering countries, Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, and then you have three economies in very complicated situations, Kyrgyz Republic, Tajikistan, and Turkmenistan, very different among themselves, but it's two tiers. This invites divide and conquer, and that's the reality. And what this means is that Central Asia has what technically we say has a low level of agency, a low ability to affect change on a global level as Central Asia. Central Asia's agency is far lower than the individual agencies of some of the countries within the region. So you have meetings of various sorts and so on, but without ability really to affect the larger picture. Now, to their credit, the presidents met a year and a half ago in the Kyrgyz Republic at Cholpan Ata. I urge you to look at the list of, I think, 22, 23 areas where they signed that they would now advance cooperation in these areas. It's a very impressive list. Hats off to the presidents. But then you have to ask, why was there no follow-up? You have universities, you have research centers, you have think tanks. Not one of them bothered in the year and a half since this took place to go down that list and say what concretely has been done. As a result, it looks in retrospect, unfortunately, like blah, blah, blah. Now, where does this leave us? It would seem to me that ask the question, what do you do, what do we do, and what do we do jointly? I think, first of all, the United States should consider funding but staying out of an office that monitors advances on a regional level in every sphere. Sports, women's affairs, medicine, you name it. No one is monitoring this. Easy to set up. It would be very interesting because they will discover there's a lot more happening under the surface than is visible. It's been visible at this conference, to be sure. Now, I think this should not be part of the C5+1, this monitoring. It should be Central Asia's property. If the United States or other friends of Central Asia want to help initiate it and fund it at the beginning, good. Otherwise, please stay out. Second, I would say it's time to coordinate. I don't use the word integrate. Coordinate the national chambers of commerce across the region. Yes, there was an effort to do this a few years back. It failed. That was a different era. Now it would work. And I think this is something, again, the US Chamber of Commerce can take an active role in bringing them together and then staying out. Set the feast, wish everyone a nice dinner, and leave the room. That would be a big step toward progress. So third, do you realize that there is no regional information? Yes, I know you can cite this website, that website. That's very good. And occasionally this newspaper or this television station, but there is no regional media. So all the things that I've been talking about here, there's no place where those things are regularly reported. Why doesn't the United States or a group of foreign friends of Central Asia, could bring in Japan, bring in Korea, bring in the Indians, fund a regional medium? It should be in the traditional formats, newspapers, they're still read, radio, television, yes, and then it has to be on the internet as well. Regional news that is presented in 5 regional languages and in English. This would overnight transform the awareness of Central Asia as a region. Information, in other words. Now, where does this leave us? In Washington, for example, until this autumn, the Central Asian ambassadors never met as a group. Oh, they'd get together at this event or that event in Navruz or whatever, but they never sat down and seriously talked as a group. We're bringing them together on a monthly basis, dinners. They then subpoena Americans whom they want to meet with and hear from, and they have very interesting conversations. Similarly, relationships with Congress. Yes, you have a group that's Uzbek caucus of a couple of guys. You have a Kazakh caucus and so on. There is no Central Asia caucus in the US Congress. You could create this tomorrow. Why not do it? These are obvious steps. Now, I've been speaking about Central Asia as I conclude. I want to enter into this discussion the fact that Central Asia itself is changing. Nowadays, you can't talk about Central Asia without talking about Azerbaijan too. which is why when the ambassadors get together in Washington, they include the Azeri ambassador. It's why the presidents have invited them to come as an observer. It's obvious Azerbaijan is Central Asia today. Now, I would suggest this isn't the end of the expansion process. There are at least 3 stages I can imagine. The first next stage after Azerbaijan would be Georgia and Armenia. When they get things straightened out there, they should be brought in fully. After that, indeterminate time, but inevitably, Afghanistan. And I respect what Kazakhstan's $1.5 billion of trade last year, hope for $3 billion next year. That's great. The United States should encourage this because Central Asians are in fact doing the research and exploration on a daily basis that will could guide the United States, Europe, and other countries in the future on whether to develop or not develop further their relations with Afghanistan. And then finally, beyond that, if you want to be very utopian in the future, I wouldn't exclude Mongolia, which has very serious reasons for being included. Okay, in conclusion, does this leave us with the glass half full or half empty? And what's the state of agency in Central Asia? This we could debate all day. I'm not going to. I've taken too much time. But my point here is that the environment has changed dramatically, and in most respects positively, far more so than either Central Asians themselves, who are still hyper cautious, or your Western friends have acknowledged. Let's acknowledge these changes and let's build on them. Now, what does that mean? Whatever happens in Ukraine, I'm repeating, Russia has lost. I mean, even if they claim victory at some point, it's still lost. As far as Central Asia is concerned, it's transformative. That opens the way for you all to do many things. Do I have a program of what should be done? No. Do you? No. I think of Franklin Delano Roosevelt when he was running for president in 1932, at a terrible time, 1932. Someone asked him, Mr. Roosevelt, what's your program? His answer was, try something. If that doesn't work, try something else. That's my program for Central Asia. And it seems to me, up to now, Central Asia has been driving with a handbrake on. So if I can conclude with a mixed metaphor, I would say, take the handbrake off and fill the glass.